Ladies and gentlemen, we are live, as this is the main event you've all been waiting for. Brought to you by Axonius, the cybersecurity asset management company. It's time!
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cloud Security Podcast with Virtual Coffee with Ashish. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are talking about cloud security tools and maybe the right way to do it, because we've been talking about CSPM, CNAP, and all these other tools that come into the market. But we never spoke about what does it take to operationalize that. So I'm looking forward to talk about this with a really good friend of mine. And funny enough, he's also a repeat guest as well. But let me cue in the music. Hey, Gaurav, how's it going, man?
Hey, good to see you, man.
Good to see you as well, man. I think it feels like it's been ages that we kind of came onto the show, but I'm so glad I could bring you back on, man.
Yeah, awesome.
Actually, I've got a few folks coming in as well. Hey, Martinez, thanks for staying awake. Martinez is from the UK, so I appreciate you staying awake for this one, Martinez. Hey, Vineet as well. Lovely to see you, man. So for people, I mean, I kind of feel I know you. I hope you have your drink as well, man. Cheers. Thanks for coming in, man.
I do. There you go.
Cheers. Thanks for coming in. I was going to say, for people, I know you, some people who are new to us, like I think since you've come in last, we've kind of grown quite a bit. So who is Gaurav for some of the newer folks who probably have not heard from you before? And also your journey into cybersecurity as well, while you want to throw that in there.
Yeah, I'm just a simple security person. That's all I know. That's all I do. That's all I want to do.
Actually, that's a good one. Yeah, because I think actually you have an interesting story of how you stumbled onto the whole cybersecurity startup thing as well. But I'm curious, like, because you were not a programmer before, though, right?
No, I was not a programmer before. Although I just loved everything related to technology in general. I don't know, but when I was last time when I was on the podcast, I spoke about how I really got into security and not just cloud security.
That's right.
The radio thing. Did I talk about it?
Yeah, you did. So if you want to give a short intro into that.
Yeah, so basically those who are listening to me for the first time here, basically I used to have this FM radio, and it used to have this FM band, which will go from 88 megahertz to 108 megahertz. And I just was curious, like, why won't it go above 108? And that's when I realized that, I can just open it up and just turn it manually. And it did. And that's when I realized that, I'm listening to my neighbor's conversations over whatever they are speaking over a cordless phone. And that was like early 90s when people didn't have encryption on the cordless phone.
Yeah,
that was pretty interesting to me. And I think that's when I realized that, okay, the fun things really happen at the boundaries of things.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because for folks who are a bit more experienced in cybersecurity space, I think they have so whenever they share this story, it's always interesting to know kind of like what was unique about that particular time as well, because these are things you kind of like don't hear anymore anyone talk about. So I'm glad you're gonna share that as well, man. I was gonna say, thanks, Martina. Sorry, just quickly acknowledging it. Other US streams are 1 a.m. or 3 a.m. So I would definitely keep this at this one, man. So it's a good time for you as well, Martinez. Because it is Cloud Security Podcast, and I kind of wanted to touch on the whole cloud security as a topic itself. But how is cloud security kind of different? Maybe we can start here. What is cloud security for you? Because I just realized I have a few more people than last time I saw you. So what does cloud security mean for you?
I think for me, it begins with security. So it's as simple as applying your security principles to cloud. So I like to think in terms of like object-oriented programming. So it's something like cloud extends data centers kind of a thing. It's a form of a data center but managed by someone else. So whatever the unique things are to the cloud, you simply apply the same security principles to the cloud, and that's cloud security.
Yeah, and what about the tooling then? When you think of like cloud security tooling, what kind of tooling are you thinking in terms of, I guess, but what are some of the examples that come to your mind?
I think tooling wise, you will find that it's just all over the place. Like you have tools which tell you the risk in the system. These are typically your CSPMs and CWPPs of the world. Then you have threat detection systems like your IDS kind of thing. They are looking at your traffic pattern and your API calls and your event and audit data and telling you that, oh, this seems like you have some attack going on, right?
Yeah.
But I would actually, I've started to now started to think about this whole tooling in a different perspective altogether now. So those of you who write code, you probably know about the compile time errors and your runtime errors, right? So the way that I think of in the security also is you can think of your risk detection kind of tools as your compile time errors, right? This is things like, oh, you have this server open to the internet, right? Whereas if somebody is actively attacking you, those are more like incident kind of alerts. So those I would say are really like truly runtime things. And you can't look for runtime things at compile times, right? And that's where it helps to think in terms of compile time versus runtime.
That's an interesting one. I never thought about it that way, because so the ones that are giving you a risk information, like the CSPMs of the world, a lot of the times it may be just talking about, hey, your posture is not right, but that's not telling you there's an active attack going on. There's no threat. It just means that, hey, your S3 bucket seems public. I guess you should look at it. It's like one of those compilation
Yeah, exactly.
errors.
Yeah, it's like a compile time warning that, hey, you are assigning a string to an integer or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a warning. It's against the best practice. In fact, you can probably fine tune what I just said to more like compile time warning to runtime errors. And one thing
Two
is
different
for
things.
sure, that the compile time warnings will likely become runtime errors under the right conditions, right? So
Yep.
suppose somebody gives an integer and you assign it to a string, that's when it will become an error, but
Yep.
it's not yet, right? So same way, if you have S3 bucket open to the internet, it's not like it has been compromised immediately. Well, for all practical purposes, people will just listen on these events and just get to know. But
Yep.
in general, yes, you can apply the similar kind of pattern or thinking.
So how is that different from like an on-premise security then? Because sounds like, I mean, like it's yeah. I'm just curious because you know how when you say that, I feel like there's a challenge, similar challenges there as well. But how is cloud security tooling or cloud security world different to the on-premise security world?
I think if you look at what are the unique things about cloud, things that you will not find in the on-prem world is what really changes how you think about it. So in the cloud world, more or less everything is public unless you configure it in a way to be not public, or you can just say everything is private unless you configure it to be public. So there is very sort of API driven way to make things public or private, right? Whereas in the on-prem world, it's like just one data center, you have a public IP range, everything that hits it's public. But in the cloud world, that distinction becomes a little bit hazy. It's not very clear, like how public a public thing has to be before it becomes public. Like if today I launch a virtual machine in the cloud and I say that, okay, I can receive incoming connections from within the cloud, is that public or is it private? Or is semi-public? So things I would say in general are a little bit more complicated, and in some ways they are simple when it comes to on-prem versus cloud.
Right, and because the tooling that you mentioned, the CSPM and SIEM stuff, those are not really applicable for like an on-premise world as well. So they're specifically designed for, I guess, for cloud environments. So that may not be a full picture as well. So maybe that's also where there's some bit of a difference there, because I guess you have tooling which is just created for cloud, and there's tooling just created for on-premise, but then there's tooling which is on-premise, but they're saying, hey, I can do the cloud as well. So there is that kind of like a, what do you call it, confusing world being created there as well.
Yeah, in fact, another analogy I was just thinking about is, think of it like if somebody is asking you, hey, can you carry this ice from one place to another place? Will you carry ice in a water bottle? Likely not, because hey, right? At the same time, ice is an abstraction over water. It's just a form of water, right? So think of it cloud, right? So cloud is again an abstraction over your on-prem system in some ways, right?
Yeah.
So in theory, you can say that, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all water. But again, it's when you apply the context, things change a lot. So I would say that, yes, the on-prem tooling sort of works in the cloud, but not really. It is up to you that you bring in, you configure things, and you apply the cloud context to that on-prem tooling. And that's why you will see that, there are so many cloud security companies just building very cloud native tooling.
All right. And so maybe using that as an example, because we are talking about implementation of cloud security tools. I'm sure there are challenges which are just implementing challenges in general across the plethora of tools we have, where on-premise are trying to be cloud native, we have cloud native, and then we have cloud security tools. Because when you mentioned cloud security tools as well, we mentioned CSPM, CWPP, but even cloud providers have their own tooling as well. So it's almost like there are 3 buckets of these. So how are people normally implementing these days? Like, what are some of the examples of how people are implementing some of these tools?
That's a difficult and important question. I think it eventually boils down to how your organization is structured and where you are in the cloud journey. You will find that companies who are doing this lift and shift kind of projects, they are bringing their on-prem tooling to the cloud as is. And that's why you will find that even the cloud service providers are allowing you to run that on-prem tooling. Like things like doing packet captures. Like it was never a thing in the cloud, but all cloud service providers more or less provide you this functionality, because without that, your on-prem IDS is not going to work. Right. So how people end up implementing is very, very heterogeneous. It's all over the place, no standardization. And that's why I see this as a very common challenge, is that people don't have a holistic view of where things are in the cloud.
Oh, because actually, to your point, because if I'm going into cloud today, and if I already have, say, a security product, IDS, IPS, or endpoint protection, or something or the other, most likely the license is still active. The company may have gone into cloud, but I'm not going to buy new tooling because I've still got this existing tooling. I need to find out a way to figure this out because I don't have the budget for a new one. So keeping that in mind, I guess to your point, there would be pockets of different kinds of implementation. And we kind of spoke about depending on whether it's runtime or compile time, which I love the idea that is there a lot of tooling around runtime? I didn't realize there was a lot of tooling around runtime, because I guess that's what, and I'm sorry, where I'm going with this is that because that's what people like us would be worried about, right? At runtime, I want to find out something is happening, and I to your point about if an S3 bucket is an issue, I probably would find out through runtime. Is that right?
Well, S3 bucket open to the internet is probably you can find easily at the compile time also, depending upon how you go about creating buckets. So if you are using ISE, infrastructure as code, like your CloudFormation on Terraform, you can do compile time checks to figure it out. Yeah. But at the same time, let's suppose you have a Docker image and it's a simple web server. At compile time or at the build time, you can at best find out the number of vulnerabilities. But guess what? If a 0-day has been just found in a particular operating system, you are not going to find it just by using compile time tooling. You have to do runtime scans of your environment, unless you have a completely immutable infrastructure that you are refreshing every single day. And another thing is when it comes to runtime security, you have things like, oh, if somebody is doing a SQL injection attack on my web server, or cross-site scripting, or things like that.
Oh yeah, because that's we're going to WAF territory and application security as well.
Yeah, exactly. Or if it has somebody compromised your cloud credentials, like somebody was able to access your access key, secret key, and is now doing S3 CP star. At that point of time, it becomes like a runtime thing, because there is no way on the compile time you will be able to figure out.
Actually, that's interesting, man. Because as you were saying that, I'm just realizing. So in my as a conversation that I have with other CISOs as well, a lot of the times people may think that as, hey, CSPM would solve all your problems, but to what you were saying earlier, it's just compile time. It's not even like I mean, I guess there's next generation of CSPM, for lack of a better word, coming in, where now context has suddenly become important. So the context is the runtime part that we're referring to, right? So for people who have been kind of like, because you've had a history with CSPMs before, you had your previous startup, so maybe that could be a good form to start, because a lot of people may already have a CSPM, and if they have the assumption that, hey, that thing, I think I have an answer for this already. But how do people normally? I'm going to use the word operationalize, because I feel like that's where it kind of fits in more into the enterprise side, but it still means the same as implementation. So how do people operationalize like a CSPM?
Yeah, that's interesting, because by definition, CSPMs are supposed to tell you the risk in the environment. And one of the biggest challenge that I see is that you need to be very careful about what kind of risk you actually want to know, right? So CSPMs can tell you just about everything, that you have these many regions, and this is the configuration which is not in the desired state. And I think the incentives of CSPM tooling is more aligned towards, oh, I'm supposed to show more and more risk. Where things become really challenging from an operational perspective is that, do you care? Like, you are bound anytime you do any sort of a scan, right? And it's just not about CSPM. Even if you do vulnerability scanning, right, you are bound to find tons and tons of issues in the environment, right? The most important thing when it comes to operationalization is about how do you fine tune your system to only get the alerts that matter.
Interesting. So is that where you reckon it's failing as a CSPM implementation, where now we have, it's not like the alerts that matter, but it's almost 20,000, 30,000 alerts, like a screen of red on your face. So people just go, that's just way too much, man. And I saw your t-shirt as well, stay alert, not fatigued. So, and it's a very known thing in the industry that for people who work in security operations, or for people who are monitoring the space, they always talk about alert fatigue. And I'm curious, because kind of like, why do you feel people are in this alert fatigue phase? Because you don't fine tune enough, or like what's some of the reasons for that?
I think there are multiple ways to think about this problem. One is, believe it or not, compliance. For compliance reasons, people don't want to say that, oh, we don't care about, say, encryption of our storage volumes. Like EBS volume not encrypted is one of the most common AWS created CSPM alert you will find, right?
Yeah, that's right.
From a compliance perspective, sure, it probably matters, that you have some disk volume which is not encrypted. But if you really think about it, what are the chances that some data center employee will go to a specific availability zone, find the server rack, and find that, oh, this is your server, this is where the data resides, take that disk out and walk away, right? Why is that risk a medium risk, right? So from a compliance perspective, you can argue that, yes, if that were to happen, so many things, can go wrong. But chances of that happening, or your focus should not necessarily be that to begin with, right? You have much higher chances of some employee making a very honest mistake of not configuring your IAM properly, or launching some sort of a Redis or a Hadoop server without authentication and not putting in proper network controls. So that's like one way to think about um, all the alert fatigue, because hey, we do want to get all these alerts, but I don't think so that you probably want to get all these alerts, but the alerts that you want to act upon, finding that needle in the haystack, I think, is the number one challenge.
Yep. And so for keeping that in mind, then, is it more like a situation where people going, you have a lot of things that you're dealing with at any given point in time, and alert fatigue is something that can be managed? Because I know you kind of did some work around this space, because I feel like normally when people talk about alert fatigue, and it's usually related to a SIEM, and I would love to for you to kind of just define what SIEM is for people who may not know what SIEM is, and how does SIEM play a role in a cloud world, I guess, and with the tooling?
Yeah, the SIEM space is fairly interesting, like anything else in cloud security, because I just think that the SIEMs of the world are just not doing what people used to think of, like how a SIEM system should work. So think about it, right? 10, 20 years back, the whole point of using a SIEM system was to normalize the alerts and aggregate them and contextualize them. That's no longer happening. Like every single SIEM that I know of, they are all focused on, hey, give us raw data, we will do threat detection, and we will surface high quality alerts out. But that's not the premise of a SIEM system. It is supposed to be normalizing your alerts and aggregating and contextualizing. And that's not happening, right? So yeah, I mean, that's where the challenge lies. You will think that, hey, why can't I solve this problem by using some sort of a SIEM? But I don't think so that any SIEM is considering cloud security tooling.
Oh, so you're saying, and this is for everyone, and I think I may have been guilty of this as well in the past, where a lot of security folks are all about, hey, all the logs should just go into a SIEM, and my security operation team would look at it and they would be able to raise alerts on it. But I guess one challenge that I used to have with SIEM was the security operation team never had the context for what what kind of alerts are relevant for like a cloud. And to your point, a lot of times you kind of like give them the CSPM feed as well. And then to your point, they are going and trying to investigate all these medium risk issues where, hey, encryption is not enabled. Is this serious? I don't know. Like maybe it's serious because it reaches a medium risk. So talking about the number of alerts are coming in, I feel like, you feel it's like like one of those people process technology kind of problem that we're talking about over here? Because I feel like we kind of spoke about implementation, compilation time, runtime. Then we kind of went into like what are some of the existing tools in the space. We have the on-premise solution, which people are trying to make a cloud native. Then we have cloud native solution. We also have SIEMs of the world, which were initially they started using something else, but now they're going in a very different path. And I think I just got a comment from Darpan as well. Oh yeah, he's your fan. I don't know if you remember, Darpan. 100% agree. SIEMs need to be designed mainly keeping in mind traditional on-premise systems. So, sorry, did you want to add anything to what Darpan is saying?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they were indeed designed, and the whole point of the cloud context is just not available, and they have just stopped, just focusing on what they are supposed to be. So SIEMs are more like a log aggregation system.
Yeah. And to your point, because a lot of people who may be not having the money of a SIEM as an organization, they go down the open source path. And I feel like if this is what is causing alert fatigue, and now you kind of have been looking at a t-shirt as well, you kind of been quite invested into this alert fatigue space, and you kind of have like an open source thing as we recently opened up to the world, I guess. Open source product that you opened up to the world. That's a great way to say it. So can you tell us a bit about that as well?
Yeah, sure. So we realized that because there is no one who is doing the normalization of the cloud security alerts, and without doing normalization, you just cannot get a homogeneous and a holistic view of security. So we open source this solution which can take an alert from your CSPMs, normalize it, and contextualize it, and then just send the alert forward to some sort of a SIEM solution. So we are not. So we open source this tool because, again, I think open source is the right way to go about doing security, especially in the cloud. You'd want to be able to leverage the power of community. And the purpose is to just help people deal with alert fatigue of CSPMs.
So, considering we're talking about implementing cloud security tool, and we've introduced another tool, what's the right way to implement cloud security tool and going back or operationalize? So, would you say the folks who are listening in and are curious about the open source, if you can name it as well, and probably talk about from a context of people who probably have a SIEM at the moment or have a like a CSPM tool at the moment, how would this be challenging or making a difference to the alert fatigue?
Yeah, so the tool that you can it's a simple CloudFormation template that you can deploy in your AWS account, is 100% serverless, open source, available under Apache license. And you simply send your alerts to a queue, inbound queue, and alerts become available in the outbound queue. And the only thing that we do at the open source project is that it adds the normalization and the context within the alert. And then you can take that alert and put it in your SIEM solution. And on your SIEM, all you have to do is just refer to this normalized alert. So the examples would be that suppose you want to find out alerts related to IAM issues, related to permissioning issues, right? And you do not care about which vendor has sent that alert. You likely don't even care about which cloud service provider you are using, because you are just curious, or you are investigating, or you want to just find out where all of my issues related to permission management, IAM, or maybe related to storage buckets. Because we do this normalization, you can just write simple thing, alert.classification equals network. That's it. So all of the network security issues you will be able to find out.
Actually, that's interesting, man, because I think a lot of people may not even know what normalization really means, because normalization in a different context, especially for people who may not be from the log aggregation kind of a world. And it's like, what do you mean by normalization, if you don't mind defining that as well?
I think it's a potato thing. It's as simple as that. Calling a thing, that's it. Basically, let's suppose you want to find out, or suppose you are curious about your disk volumes should be encrypted. Suppose this is your desired state, that if I have a disk in the cloud, it should be encrypted. The way that you will go about finding about the disks which are not encrypted is that different cloud service provider has different sort of tooling, or you might be using a commercial CSPM tool. But all of the alerts, all of the information which is given out is just very much specific to the vendor. So there is no way that you can just say just one simple thing, alert.classification equals storage.encryption.
Yep.
Because you cannot say this one thing. Now you will have to write a very complicated query saying that this or this or this or this, because there are just so many different things, right? So think of it like, why do we have standards? Like internet, if you think about it, is one of the greatest normalization thing ever. You and I are able to have this podcast. I bet you are likely not using Firefox, or
no,
right?
No,
but I am using Firefox right now. You are using a different browser. We have different probably audio system, yet we are able to have this communication in a seamless manner because things are normalized, right? I think that's missing in security. Everybody is just doing their own thing. Nobody is thinking of like the greater good. And that's what I mean by sort of normalization in cloud security, is that greater good.
That's a great example, man. Because I think, and it kind of hones into the point that you were saying earlier about the different kind of whether on-premise tooling or your CSPM tooling or CWPP or all the other 4-letter acronyms that Gartner has been kind of introducing left, right, and center. I feel like I need to bring someone from Gartner to talk about why do they keep releasing all these different like 4-letter acronyms for cloud. It's almost like every other day there's a new one. I think I saw yesterday CIEMM or something, and I'm like, what the hell is that? But apparently we need another one. So Darpan has a question. Curious for your thoughts on CSPM shifting to pre-deploy time checks. As shift-left mindset gets embedded into security, does it remove the effort of aggregation and normalization?
I think the normalization is not just about runtime versus compile time, those kind of things, but it's more about attaining vendor neutrality. Because what happens is, even if you're able to do shift left, that's great. You are able to detect things right on your GitHub. It's a pull request. That's great, but you still want to be doing runtime checks because things change at runtime, right? And not everybody is doing compile time checks. Think of it like unit test versus system integration test. Just because you have a unit test doesn't mean that you're not going to do system integration test, and vice versa, right? So where the normalization and aggregation really helps is that you are sort of future-proofing yourself. Now you can easily acquire another companies without worrying about their tooling, right? People buy companies and they get acquired and everything, and you will find that as companies grow, they become more and more heterogeneous. So I think you should go for both. You should be doing as much of unit testing as possible, and you should be doing system integration test, which means that you should be doing compile time checks, runtime checks, as well as normalization.
Right, all three.
All three.
All three. Oh, wow. So hopefully that answers your question, Darpan, but feel free to drop another one, man. Darpan is also a long-time supporter of the show and the previous guest as well. I kind of like you. He's come twice on the show as well, man. And I was going to say just that shift left mindset, because that kind of adds to the complexity of the number of tools that we kind of keep in a cloud context. I mean, because cloud security in a lot of ways, CSPMs of the world, that's solving the cloud infrastructure environment in a lot of ways. That's why we spoke about the EBS volumes, we spoke about S3 bucket. We haven't even gone to the application security side, right? So no one's talking about normalization for that. But to bring back to where we were talking about the whole deployment of CSPMs now, I'm just putting a hat of someone who's basically gone, okay, I've deployed CSPM. I've got a SIEM as well. And I know my team is experiencing alert fatigue. And so based on what you just basically said earlier, the open source tool that you were talking about is kind of talking about putting some context around it. And so because we believe, and I think this has been a thing in the industry for some time, that there is not much context. Like, do we have the flexibility these days to kind of talk about, hey, this is the context for my environment? Like, for example, not everyone needs to be PCI compliant, but every tool out there will tell you, hey, use this PCI DSS compliance check. I'm like, but I don't need it. But no, it is available if you need it. So from that context, do you find that the normalization that you were referring to, that's even more harder if you already have existing tool set, or is that easy? It's still achievable if you have like an existing SIEM, existing CSPMs of the world? How would you, like, to your point, would and I'm trying to, as I say this, I'm just trying to realize what are some of the challenges people are seeing in this space in terms of whether it's more normalization, as you mentioned.
Yeah. I think many times people confuse between standardization and normalization, right? They say that, oh, we have all these standards, right? Why do we need to normalize? Well, guess what? You will find that one standard is never ever going to fit your needs, right? You're going to have multiple standards which apply to you, and these standards call things differently. So for example, storage bucket permissions, like simple bucket policies, or your IAM permissions, right? Mm-hmm. Principle of least privilege. You will find that, it is in CIS, where CIS 1.3 maps to PCI 4.5 maps to NIST, this, then, all right? So Now, if you want to find out, okay, show me, I want to figure out, do I have issues related to my network and identity and whatnot? Now, where do you go, right? Do you write your OR conditions because one standard has some subset, some has superset? So that's why we had to like come up with our own way of. So that's why instead of this is a there is, I think, SKCD comic too, which has when you have n standards and these are not fulfilling our needs, so let's just create a new standard. So we did not want to do that. So instead of creating a net new standard, all we have done is that we have just mapped the standards among themselves. That okay, you are saying it's X, you are saying that it's Y. Okay, cool. So basically, when X says this, Y this guy says it's Y. So we simply do this mapping of X and Y.
Wait, so what about people who are starting today then? Because I feel like there's a lot of people, and I think there was a report that came out that mentioned 60% of the enterprise space still has not gone into cloud. I think it was last year's report, but so there might be still a lot of people who may not have considered a CSPM or a cloud security tool, but they are in a cloud world and possibly thinking about sending the logs to SIEM. So what are some of the things that they should be thinking about so that they can, I guess, operationalize the right way the cloud, for lack of, I mean implementation, operationalization, I think feel like very enterprise, like a normal people term and an enterprise term. But what can people do to operationalize the right way when they're looking at any new tooling for their cloud environment?
Yeah, I would say just one thing, and I would say it thrice. Prioritize, prioritize, prioritize. Okay.
Yeah.
Figure out what matters to you. Because if you go and ask someone what's wrong, you are bound to get, all these things are wrong, right? It's like, you go to a doctor for your annual checkup, you are bound to find that, these things, multiple things are wrong with you, right? But your doctor is the one who will tell you, what, this doesn't matter, this is what you should focus on. So something like that, where you need to figure out what matters to you, what are your business priorities, and just focus on those. You can send all of your alerts to SIEM solutions if you want, but I recommend, even if you do that, figure out what matters and just work on that.
Interesting. So going back to people, process, technology, this is definitely not a technology problem.
I think depending upon who you ask, honestly, people incentives are aligned in a different way. Like if you ask, like somebody like a manager of security or something, like a director or VP or a person who is trying to become like, a manager in the security space, he or she might say that, this seems like a people problem. I wish I had more people, or I could train people. I need people. It's just people problem. If you ask a consulting company, they will say, this is a process problem. If you just, buy our consulting service, in 3 months, we're going to give you this very pretty looking report, and then the problem will be gone. If you ask a vendor, and these days you just throw a stone and it will likely hit a cloud security vendor, you will find that this is a technology problem. But in reality, things are just very complicated and they are all interconnected. I think it is people, process, and technology problem. It's not just one. It's a combination.
Yeah, that's a great answer as well, because you kind of like hit different nails at the layers there as well, man. Just want to make sure I've answered all the questions that have been raised over there. Yep. Sweet. So that's kind of what I had the time for. So I just want to go into some of the fun questions so people get to know you a bit more as well. I know some people may already know you from before, so but it'd be good for newer folks to get to know you as well. The just 3 questions, so not too many. The first question that I have is, what do you spend most time on when you're not working on, say, normalizing the alert fatigues of the world for people?
Oh, well, that's probably a very difficult question, because that's all I think about.
Especially when people are working from home these days, I imagine that's the only thing that's going around people's mind. Like, how do I keep myself occupied with work?
Yeah. Well, I do actually spend a lot of time just learning new things. I just have this knack of learning some really arcane things which have like nothing to do with computer science, software, security, nothing. So
right.
I've been gardening a lot, so I'm learning about plants, vegetables, and how to grow them. And I like to be fairly scientific about it. So I sign up on these different courses online.
Right.
And so
Wait,
yeah.
so you have one of those auto watering thing where, at a certain point in time, it just waters the plants and everything? Because I totally kill all the
No, I
plants.
like to be a little bit of a manual. Like I like to enjoy the process. So I actually like to know, like, okay, how often I should water this thing. And I do a little bit of A/B testing with my plants too. Like one plant I will give this much water, other plant I will give more water, and then see, okay, which one is doing better.
Oh, I love it. You do A/B testing with your water as well. I love it. The next question that I have is, what is something that you're proud of but is not on your social media?
Say it again. What's that?
What is something that you're proud? What is something that you're proud of but is not on your social media?
Oh, I just came back on social media on Twitter. So I'm not really, and I'm on LinkedIn only. I'm not on Facebook or anything. But what am I proud of?
That is not there at the moment on your social media.
I just say that, gosh, I would say that I have become a fairly minimalist person, and I'm very proud of it. I just don't need things anymore. So personally, yeah, that has been the biggest, I would say, help to my like mental health and everything.
Right.
Yeah, and I just donate a lot. I do a lot of charity work now. So rather than getting things, it's the giving away of things that actually I would say I'm more proud of.
Wow, man, that's pretty awesome. And so you almost like you're going up the Maslow's hierarchy of need, as they say. So like, no, it's not about
Something
getting,
like
it's
that.
about giving.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
that's pretty awesome, man. And thanks for sharing that as well. One final question: what's your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share?
Well, last time I said coffee, so I'm not gonna change that answer. So my favorite cuisine is coffee.
So your favorite cuisine is coffee.
Yes, absolutely.
I remember you gotta go into different kinds of coffees as well.
Yeah, so those of you who are in the US, there's a coffee roasting company called Blue Bottle, and they have this Night Light decaf. So if you want a decaf coffee, I highly recommend ordering this Night Light decaf. It has subtle notes of creme brulee, and it's decaf, so you can probably drink it as much as you want or more.
Wow. By the way, fun fact, Blue Bottle is an Australian company, or at least started by an Australian person. The guy was in Melbourne. Yeah. So
all right, so you should order it too then.
yeah, that's right. No, so just saying, so that's why virtual coffee is the sheesh. So it's like, if you live in Melbourne, you cannot get away not having a good coffee every day. So I'm glad your favorite Australian brand is so your favorite coffee brand is an Australian coffee brand. So that's great for me to hear as well, man. But for people who may have more questions about the whole alert fatigue side and implementing or operationalizing cloud security tools, man, where can they find you, man? Where can they reach out to you?
On LinkedIn, I'm fairly I think you can connect me, follow, just send me a message. I'm mostly online.
Awesome. And Arjun, I think I enjoyed my conversation because I feel like this was a topic that I wanted to cover for sure, because a lot of us have been talking about tooling for a lot of time. It's about use this, use that, but no one has taken the step back and go, hey, is this really the way we want this to function? So I'm glad I could bring you on to talk about this. But that's all we had time for in today's show, man. I'm hoping to kind of bring you again and maybe have a similar conversation. But for everyone else, I will see you on the next weekend's episode. Thanks so much for hanging out. And especially thanks to Vineet and Martinez and Darpin as well for the comments as well. It really makes me feel like, oh my God, I've got so many interesting topics that I didn't think of. Oh, Chom, you're there as well. Hey, Chom, thanks, man. Thanks for coming in, Chom. So thanks to all of you guys for joining us as well. But we'll see you on the next weekend's episode. Until then, stay safe and have a good one. Thanks, everyone.